Is it working? Yo, it's working. I'm in the DAW. This is real YouTuber stuff right here. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you are doing fantastic. I wanted to try a different kind of video today. Hopefully keeping it short and giving you 3 quick tips for hard rock and metal guitars. What you just heard and what we're going to go through today is an old session of a Sonata Arctica song that I did a full mix cover of. They are fantastic, by the way. Yanni is definitely one of the primary reasons that I got into playing guitar, and they're a perfect entry point into power metal, because not only are they one of the best power metal bands, they're one of the least cheesy. Now, I like some cheese, but, everybody has varying scales there. So I've moved everything that we need right here over to the right for the purposes of this video. I started my journey of learning how to mix, engineer, trying to do everything myself at home about a year ago. And one of the things that I always struggled with is how do I make the guitars feel like they're part of the song? Glue everywhere, so rhythm guitar and bass, but one of the most difficult things for me was certainly lead guitar and rhythm guitar. How does lead guitar fit into the equation? I want lead guitar to cut, but then it just sounds like it's on top of an existing track. What's going on? On that note, if you're seeing this wow, it looks like Kyle's using a lot of processing. I am. This is from a few months ago where I was going through this phase where I was really carving up everything to get it exactly how I want. I've tried to go back to a more minimalist approach since then, and in a couple weeks I have a full mix original song coming out to demonstrate different kinds of 80s rack modulation effects within the context of a mix. And that'll be a little bit more raw, probably. So you heard it in the intro. Keep in mind, I'm always going to leave my mastering chain on so you get a consistent level for the video. You heard what was going on in the intro. Let's just play it back again one more time here so you can see what we're working with. Just a very Guitar Hero kind of part, very, very fun to play. So let's talk about the rhythm guitars. I'm going to solo those right here. Pretty standard stuff. I'll bring bass in. So for EQ methodology, I like to split things up into 2 sections. There's corrective EQ, which a lot of people will do with a really modern, precise, fab filter style EQ. I refer to the second part as color EQ. When do I want the equalizer to enhance the sound instead of just fixing problems with the sound? I'm gonna pull out some EQ, compression. You'll hear the guitars raw-ish. So that's pretty standard corrective EQ, and a little bit of color, like the API has the transformer in, all that. Listen when I put the bass in. It sounds really separated to me. But now we're gonna get to the final stage of my EQ, and we're gonna pull up this Pultec style EQ. This is a very, very famous EQ, but it's not really for fixing problems. It's for color. And you'll hear this all over drums, all over vocals. I'm far from inventing this. Everybody uses this, but people refer to the Pultec guitar trick. What is that? Well, if you'll notice, you set a low frequency and a high frequency, and there's boost and attenuation for each of those. So you're boosting and attenuating at the exact same frequency, but they have different cues. So the result of this are these really interesting and musical curves. What you can do with this, especially if, like me, you kind of end up dialing in your guitars to be really clear and tight and mid-rangey, is this helps you get that big radio rock sound where everything is just super glued together. You get this big wall of sound. You know, I really associate this with those mid-2000s rock albums, whether you're talking like Fall Out Boy, Paramore, Senses Fail. If you want your guitars that are already really clear and mid-rangey to just suck back a bit and leave room for vocals on top and leave room for lead guitar on top and feel like they're really gelling with the bass, this is huge. You can really hear it on those palm mutes there. So 100 is a very safe low guitar frequency to boost. Like, even if you're not using a Pultec, if you want to add some meat back to guitars, somewhere like 90 to 120 is normally a pretty safe space. Below that, and then in the like 120 into the 200s range are normally more problem frequencies for guitars that you're going to have to attenuate more. I see people do this with 60 though, if they really want more of like a low thud that you more feel than hear on the guitars. Any of these high frequencies are safe. I would say with 12 or 16, you're definitely going to hear it less. 10 and 8 are that classic air zone. I almost always do 10 or 8. 5 is more actual presence, like it'll get really grindy, so you need to be cognizant of that. Where do I like to apply these? So just about any guitar that is generally rock, in the middle of the spectrum. Anything that's very metal, I'm less likely to apply this because the amp is probably more dialed like this in the first place, like a 5150 or whatever. Anything not less gainy, but more old school. Like, I'm not always going to go out of my way to throw this on like my hair metal shred stuff because that more focused mid sound, I don't really need the guitars to zoom out there. I need the guitars to be the guitars. So like this track, this could be called hard rock, power metal, whatever. I do this on like all modern rock, active rock sounding things. And this is also a really cool trick if you have any guitar that's pretty clean, but it needs to be more of a part. You need to go from, oh, it sounds like a deluxe that's not super loud, to, oh, I need this to be more of a Vox chimey thing. You can really crank up some frequencies here and just get a cleanish part to really have more of that, like, is it clean, is it dirty thing going on. Now we're going to talk about how to get lead guitar to sit in the mix. I'm very happy with how this song came out, and this was always a big challenge for me because you want your solo to be like the big solo part that really takes over, but it still needs to be part of the song. So let's talk about that right here. So I found the real trick with lead guitars is controlling them within the stereo space. Please consider that everything in a mix is volume. EQ is volume at different EQ levels. Compression is keeping EQ in one place. Things like reverb and pitch detune are stereo volume. So the more stereo field something has, the quieter it can be to be heard at the same volume, because it's not just one focused point that you can crank up real loud. All of a sudden you get that volume on your sides too, and you're like, wow, let me bring that back down. So using more wet effects than you would think is appropriate is a great way to really get your lead guitars dialed in. Now that's not to say that you don't need to EQ them right. You generally want less treble in lead guitars than you would think. You can pull out more low end than you would think. But let's hear that with these effects sends turned off. All of a sudden, it sounds more like you're in your room playing on top of a real track, but let me bring them in one by one here. You can hear detune and especially reverb were the big factors here. I tend to look at delay as more of part of the part. How do I want the delay to jump back out and interact with my playing? And I look at the detune and reverb as how I'm really controlling the stereo spectrum. The detune, you can do a lot with this. Like, this isn't just super 80s guitar thing. This is all over vocals on pop albums. This is all over drums. It's a really unique tool. And just the more that you mix it in, the more canonically 80s it will sound. And sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. This is approaching that territory, but it's really more so just for width. You can feel it and you can hear it in this case. So we talked about delay and detune. Reverb is the one you're really gonna hear now, where I'm using Valhalla Vintage Verb. Just there's these lexicon settings. I pull up one of the presets, I tweak it a little bit, I'm good to go. This is the make or break one. This is like, are you part of the mix or not? Now let's talk about this room bus over here. So you're either already familiar with room buses and what they do, or you aren't. So, what a smart thing to say, Kyle. Let's talk about the two ways you can wind up at this space. Number one, you know what a room reverb does. You want to send your mix into a space and mix it back in. So you can make it sound like you're playing live. You can make it sound like you're listening from the control room. The second way is we're all likely recording this with a home interface into a DAW. We're probably doctoring the tracks a lot to sound really nice and clear and modern. That is how your music can wind up sounding clinical, because back when you were tracking on tape and everything was going through hardware, you get all this cool artifacting, saturation, limiting the EQ spectrum just automatically by the time it goes to the master. You know what is the opposite of clear and clinical? Diffusion. So for this track, I wasn't necessarily trying to make it sound live. I just wound up using it because I wanted it to sound less hi-fi. I have Valhalla Vintage Verb up here. I have it on a drum room. It sounded nice and live to me, and you control your mix of what goes to this with these sends, right? So you can send sends into this reverb at different levels, and let's listen to it really quick. So you can hear it's pretty trashy, it's pretty midsy, but it also has all that low-end build-up. So when you're sending different instruments to this, people will take different approaches. Sometimes you try to mix it like you would mix a live band. I am really just looking for that mid-range trash and like that low-end thud to kind of come back in after I made everything sound clear. So generally, I'm not sending a lot of bass to this, and I'm not sending a lot of airy things like lead guitar, vocals to this, just a little bit. There's a lot of lead guitar in this. That just wound up being the sound I want. You just experiment until you get it right. So first, we're gonna play through and I'll turn it on and off, and then we're going to change the mix up and down so you can hear how you might want to apply this for different genres and stuff like that. Listen to what it's doing to that snare. All of a sudden, it just feels like it's right in there with all the other instruments. This isn't the drum room. Like, the drums have their own room on them, mixed in pretty conservatively, but they're also going to this fake live room that I've created here. And you can do that. You can stack stuff, no problem. It's just if it sounds good. I'm gonna take the mix way up and way down. Now it sounds like there's a reverb on the whole thing, not what we're looking for. Now you can't really hear it. It's not doing anything. So let's sweep through the kind of acceptable range of where you would tend to use this. So I hope you found that helpful. Like I said, I kind of mixed it up with a different kind of video today. I have new videos for you coming every single Friday, so I want to try out different formats. I also have a video about lessons you can learn from Paul Gilbert's playing coming soon. I have a video I'm really stoked on about different kinds of rack modulation, and each different piece of this full mix, I did an original song for it, is going to have a different kind of modulation on it. And I'm really stoked on the playing and how it came out, so I think you guys will actually like the song in that one too, but then we'll talk about the differences between dimension and tri-chorus and detune and more. So remember to pick up your guitar today and have fun with it. I will catch you later.